Hello and welcome to Happy Hour again, coming to you today from the beautiful social distancing home studios located in Ventura and Camarillo, California. And welcome back to Happy Hour again. I am Curtis Taylor. I'm also here with Jason Hendrick and Joby Yobi, and our very special guest this evening, Gary Stewart from Pier City Ciders. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Gary.
Well, thank you guys for having me. This is exciting.
It is our pleasure. So, Gary, I have been uploading past episodes, and when we moved to this new format, all of our old podcasts were lost, but I had all of the audio files. So I'm putting in all of these different episodes of Happy Hour, and there's at least 3 episodes where you make an appearance. One was we did an actual vertical tasting in the wine room. We talked about a harvest with you one other time, and now I'm losing what the other one was, but you're no stranger to the show.
Cheese? Was he on the cheese one or no?
I know we were at your place once, Joby.
Yeah,
and
I feel like we were doing some cheese maybe with Fritz, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. That might have been it.
Everybody immediately lost all the video files based on, how he looked with our hair. And how young and
my less hair, and now I got gray everywhere.
It was 6 years ago, so it's okay. We can lose the files. It's all right.
Yeah, we do every once in a while. A throwback from somebody else will show up with us, and we look like kids.
Yeah,
holding a microphone.
I don't know, Curtis. You just keep getting more and more handsome. So I don't know.
Come on, I was really stop.
Gary, it's the HD camera. Curtis is the only one in full HD.
I know.
Don't worry, I slipped in that text message before we got started. I'm like, Gary, make sure you comment on Curtis's handsomeness.
We're all in standard definition, but Curtis is in high definition.
Well, I'm going to segue out
Gary,
of this.
to have you on. Yeah, to go backward in time like that, though, and think about the times that you've been on the show and your impact with us as part of Four Bricks Wine. It's fun now to have you back tonight and get into the Pier City Cider component and find out what that pivot looked like, what the decision-making involved was to really transition from wine to cider.
Yeah, it's been an exciting project for us. We got together actually with you and Joby over at Joby's place probably a year and a half ago. So this is before we even launched. We were still trying to figure out what we were going to do and how to do it. And then, at one point we talked about bringing the cider over to your place, Joby, but I felt scared because I literally couldn't keep up with what I was doing. So we still haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, I remember something about, and what I admire about you, by the way, that we share is you made the cider first, and then you figured out that it was illegal to make the cider. And that's what I love. And I remember
I had to go back.
That was the hiccup.
ABC and
correct me if I'm wrong. That was the sequence, right? You made it, and then you find out you had to be a cidery. And I remember I tasted it.
Yeah. Well, what happens? It's interesting. So my O2 license, I have a license to make wine, right? And this is just basically apple wine. So at the end of the day, it's apple wine. But you do have to let the government know that you're doing something first, especially when it's with alcohol. So I was definitely backwards. So we've got it all straight now. We've paid all of our taxes and everything's good with them. So
cider is considered something different than wine and beer, right? It's a third or fourth, I guess. Distilled spirits is.
Yeah, it's a confusing thing. A lot of people seem to want to compare it to beer, but it is much more like wine. It's a fruit-based, naturally, fermented product. Just as you would grape coming in from the field, you take apples from the field, you crush them, you press them, you add yeast, and you end up with apple wine, or some people would call hard cider. So it's much more wine-like than beer-like. I think people want to call it beer because they see it in bottles that are, shaped like beer. It's carbonated like beer, but it's really, for me, it's much closer to an apple champagne or a regular champagne or sparkling wine.
So with that being said, Gary, that makes me think about the components of beer versus other beverages. And we know that you got to have water, you got to have some kind of malt, you got to have yeast. And for beer, we add hops, but the yeast is consistent. When we're thinking about making alcohol, yeast is consistent. with the winery as kind of your foundation and where people have come to know you, are you using a same or a similar type of yeast strain for your cider, or did you go completely different without
Yeah,
like really
I only
exposing
know
any
how
trade
to make,
secrets?
yeah, I only know how to make wine. So I'm not a beer guy, although I love beer, and I've sat down with plenty of the beer makers and picked their brains on things, but more for curiosity, just to see the difference between winemaking and beer making. But um, with the cider, we make it exactly the same way, Jason. We bring in fresh juice. We add it to a stainless steel tank. We use champagne yeast, and we cold ferment it just like we would all of our white wines. So takes about 3 to 5 weeks to go through fermentation. So it's a nice slow cool fermentation that we go through, and we make it exactly like we make wine. There's really no comparison to beer. There's no heat involvement. There's no, adding. Now, there are guys that are hopping and doing different things with cider. So yeah, that's definitely a component you could do to it. But you could do that to wine also. So
Yeah.
Well,
Now, go ahead, Chris.
well, I was just thinking as I'm tasting a couple of the ciders over the last couple of days, that when you're talking about champagne yeast and this cold fermentation, it makes me think of lagers and how clean lagers are. And all of a sudden I'm realizing, well, wait a second, there is this really clean, crisp quality to this. It doesn't have a high fruit. It's fairly dry. I mean, what other than it. This is going to sound oxymoronic probably, but I mean, because it's cider, it's sweet and it has those components to it, but it's dry. And as soon as you take that drink, when you finish the sip, you want to go back for another drink.
yeah, yeah, and that's the refreshing part of it for with me for cider is I do like that crisp, fresh feel, and that's really what we were going through. It's part of the brand that we were trying to push with Pier City is to have it fresh, clean, and we had no sulfites to it. So we're keeping this thing really, really lean and ready to drink.
Yeah. So Gary, I know that like some of the winemakers talk about excuse me, the wine grapes wine is made in the vineyard. And I know that's it's a very general statement, but and beer is sort of made in the brewery, right? The ingredients make the beer. Where does cider fit in? Are the apples important? How involved are you in the apples? And the other question I had when I was thinking about is your cider gluten free? Just curious for those that are
Yes, yes, and most ciders should be gluten free unless if they're adding some, there are, I guess, fining agents out there that could have gluten in it, but we're not even using fining agents at all. So, yeah, so it's definitely gluten free. And you're right, Joby. I mean, it's 95% of the work is done in the vineyard or orchard, right? So the apples that we're choosing, the first time I tried to make cider, what happened for us is unfortunately 3 or 4 years ago, my wife started having some gluten problems. She realized she was gluten intolerant, so we had to switch over to kind of a gluten-free household over here. And so beer kind of went out not the window for me. She was not that mean to me, but she started bringing ciders home, and we were trying different ciders, and I thought, wow, I could do this, and so of course I went down to Safeway, forgetting my wine sense, right? Thinking, oh, this doesn't matter. I could go buy Mott's or Martinelli's or whatever cider, whatever apple juice they had there, and make cider with it, and it was horrific. It was absolutely horrible. Just as if you went to the grocery store to pick up some Thompson seedless grapes and tried to make wine with it, it would not be great wine. So that was the first thing we had to figure out is apples and learning the apple industry, and we've got a pretty good source up in Washington that we can get mostly year round from them, and so that's who we're buying from. And the company we buy from, it's kind of a proprietary thing where they can kind of guarantee us a very similar mix throughout the year. And if you come in, I don't have the list of them all, but there's half a dozen to a dozen different apples that they use in that blend. So it wouldn't be the apples that you would typically see in the store. So you're not going to see Granny Smith or some of those, but they're specific to the cider industry.
We don't need to disclose all the ingredients anyway, because when my grandma's recipes were written out, you'd have a dash of this and a sprinkling of that. And there's always
Right.
at least one thing that she didn't write down. But you'd mentioned brand a few minutes ago, Gary, and really fixating for me on that term brand. How does Pier City Cider as a brand align with Four Bricks Wine, or did it at all? Because I know Four Bricks Wine had a very distinct story, like a backstory of how that name came about.
Yeah.
What does Pier City represent?
So, it's interesting, Jason. You know a lot about our background, so but I'll tell the rest of the group. On the winery side of things, we came together and started the winery before we actually knew where we were going to be. In 2011, we found the tasting room that we now are in Ventura, the city of Ventura, and the people of Ventura have been fantastic to us. And we really feel a tight part of that community. We get involved with a lot of charity there, and the love that we feel in Ventura, and not just Ventura, the whole Oxnard Plain is just fantastic. Of course, Camarillo and Oxnard and Port Hueneme, the people just treat us fantastic. And so when we started to really think about building the brand, if you will, for Pier City, it was Ventura is what we had in mind. So, our thought is that we're going to rebrand the city of Ventura as Pier City. So Huntington Beach has Surf City, right? So we couldn't steal that one, even though there's fantastic surfing up in Ventura. So Pier City is kind of what we went after. Karen and I are involved every year in the Pier Foundation, the people that are helping to support the pier. So when things happen, we have bad storms, they go in and fix it, and they have money to do that. So we've been involved with that a long time. And the pier is just an iconic spot in Ventura. It's a very different looking pier than most piers, right? We have a right-hand turn out there somewhere. And so if you look at the bottle on there, we really went in and tried to mimic the pier, even to the flag on the end. So you can kind of see where you're standing right here at the pier and then looking down at the right-hand turn, although it looks different on the screen because the screen's back.
That's all right. I'm gonna shift over. We actually have a little display set up where we're gonna shift cameras for a second, so all of our listeners can, without just taking away from your beautiful image, Gary, they can see the bottle.
Yeah, and so the whole thought on that was, from the brand, then it was the flavors, right? So, piers were set up way back in the days, right? That's where the boats would come in from overseas. They'd bring in spices and fruits and different things, and that's where commerce happened up and down the coast and from world to world. So, our brand was trying to bring flavors that would be seaside type flavors, right? Beachside, simple, crisp flavors. And some of the drinks and some of the mixes that we're making or blends that we're making on it are based on famous drinks from around the world. So today, I know we've been tasting Mai Tai, so that's a classic drink, right? We've got what else do we got here? Cider cups. The cider cup is similar to a Pimm's cup. We do a tamarind ice, which is a very classic Vietnamese style drink. So we really try to bring in those flavors and hone in on those flavors that are going to make you think, okay, I'm traveling somewhere, I'm going somewhere, I'm not just here. And it's been popular. People are coming, so it's fun, it's exciting what's going on.
Curtis, you've got a pensive look on your face. I personally, I'll take responsibility for any off-air commentary where I kind of scolded you about which beverage to talk about, because you have a vintage flavor that you're sipping on from your fridge. But let's talk about it for a second, because there were some flavors, Gary, that have come through the lineup already that are no longer in the current roster.
Okay.
So Curtis, what do you got in front of you?
Well, so when I went to the website and I was looking at what was available, and I called I was going to say tap room, the tasting room, and so Karen answered, and I was going through, okay, what's there, and then I was looking at an old list, and it said grapefruit vermouth, and I thought, and so I asked about it, and she goes, no, we're out. Oh, wait a second. And then I hear her put the phone down, and she's rustling things around. Oh, here we are. Here's a 4-pack. And I said, got it. That's mine. I want to take that one. But so yeah, I mean, I think your story of all of these different flavors that and as you're talking about them, the grapefruit vermouth is, wow, it's just wonderfully dry and refreshing. Like this is something that in 2 days when it's 80 degrees here in Camarillo and we're all sweltering, that this is a perfect kind of drink to have out and sitting in the sun.
Yeah, that on all the flavors we do, that's the first thing we have to go to is it's got to be upfront, bright, citrusy. That's pretty much along the whole line. You'll find that. And the interesting thing about grapefruit vermouth, Curtis, is it was actually a mistake. I was trying to mimic a drink that I absolutely love, which is a Campari Spritz. And it is super hard to mimic, So grapefruit just came to my mind as a bittering agent. And I made it and I said, well, it's good, but it's not Campari Spritz. So I can't even try to go down that line. It was one that we made and we kept around and people have really liked it. They like the herbaceousness of it for sure. So in trying to mimic the vermouth, of course, I'm not adding vermouth to this, guys. So don't, I'm not adding, Mai Tai mix and there's none of that going on. It's just natural essence and the real essence. Actually, I shouldn't even say natural. The real essence are going in. But in trying to mimic vermouth, we use a lot of the spices that you would typically find in vermouth. So chamomile and cardamom and some other bittering type agents that we could use in there to try to mimic vermouth, because vermouth is just still wine that has been steeped, if you will, and aged with those drying ingredients and different herbs and spices.
Yeah.
And I think too, I mean, you're talking about, so the cup one, what was the name of the cup?
Pimm's Cider Cup.
So the Cider Cup.
Yeah.
Right. And Pimm's Cup is one of my favorite ones. And if I had made that connection when I ordered it, I'd be sitting here with Pimm's Cup too. But
yeah.
for
Joby,
whatever
if you
reason,
notice, Curtis is definitely on an old man drink kick.
Well, yeah, you can't. I don't think Gary's allowed to say Pimm's Cup for his drink.
No, I'm not.
So as it came through, so like as you're saying these things, one of the things that I'm thinking about is I'm looking at the ABV on these too. So these are 7. The 2 that I have are 7%. Do you vary from that? And then if a Mai Tai is too strong for you, then here you go. Here's a 7% version of it.
Exactly. No, it really doesn't vary much. We put 7 pretty much on everything because we're allowed that little window. And so everything's really closer to probably 6.5. But just to err on any, if we get a batch that might come off or gain a little bit, we don't want to get in trouble with anybody on the tax side. So we'd rather pay a little bit more tax if we have to, if you will, and just be safe on it. Mm-hmm. So it's really close to 6.5. Some come in at 6.7. It just depends on the batch that we're getting in from Washington a little bit. But they're all in that area. So yeah, low alcohol, relatively low, right? Half as much as wine would be, and and a good stout beer, right? So they come in probably closer to that range also. And the other part of the cider I feel good with is when I'm done, I don't feel heavy. It definitely keeps me feeling a little lighter in my toes. As the older I get, I don't need as much of that weigh down. And so that's a nice thing about it too. So you feel it's refreshing. It's a refreshing drink. Much
Joby,
more
these
like
are definitely the opposite.
Huh?
So Gary, one of the inside jokes that Joby coined on the show in relation to a well-known internationally brewed stout was all the fullness and none of the fun. And I'm hearing you say that the ciders are the opposite of that.
This is the opposite. This is half the fullness and twice the fun.
But I see the thing is, Joby, is I think there's a place for all of the drinks, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I love, believe me, I love the heavy beers too. Sometimes I just like to sit down, but for me, that's a meal on a bowl.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
we're all getting up there.
Thing, and I'm not wanting to have much more than just that. And then there's times where I like, God forgive me, but Coors Light's not bad on a really hot day when you're out fishing, you know?
That's all right. We all have our guilty pleasure beers. No, that's right. So I'm gonna full disclosure. I am not a cider person, but I've tried a lot of ciders. I like trying them. But I think a lot of us come from, and I was just, the reason I'm asking is I want to know what you guys say to that consumer that comes in that says, you know, they're the consumer that's had Angry Orchard and I'm trying to think of Hornsby.
Crispin.
I'm trying to remember when I was younger. Crispin, who actually has some cool flavors, but kind of
Crispin's
sweet.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, but Angry Orchard definitely one that stands out to me as like super sweet up front.
Well,
what do you guys say to that person?
So we get both sides of that spectrum coming in. So we get the side that's saying, and this is the problem I had with Karen, you know, she was bringing these ciders home to me and I was all over the board, because you have ciders that are made to drink like wine. So there are ciders that are soured. There's ciders that are very bitter. There's ciders that have been hopped. And those ciders for me are more of a meal wine, a meal drink, right? So it's something that I would want to have a steak with, or swordfish or something like that with. And then we have the other side of the spectrum where, you know, it's the very sweet, very, very sweet, caramely, kind of heavy feeling, almost ciders. It's almost like drinking you know, like a soda pop or something. Not quite as sweet as a soda pop, but definitely along that range. And people will come in and they'll say, they'll be on one spectrum or the other saying, I don't like cider because this is all I've ever experienced. And so typically when they try our cider, they'll go, wow, okay, I get this one. This one makes sense to me. I mean, there's always the person, Joby. I can't please everybody, right? So not every bottle of wine I make and not every bottle of cider I make is gonna take care of 100% of the public. But we're hitting that 80% mark. You know, that's what we're going for. And we've had many of people come in and say, I would have never drank cider. This is the experience I had before. I didn't like it. I went up to Napa or I went here and had cider at this little cidery, and it was just, you know, not something they liked. And then they get to us and they like that, you know, that very clean, fresh, kind of upfront flavored cider that we're making. So the guy from England, and when he comes into our place, is not happy with us, you know, when he tastes that. I mean, he's, you know, this is a bombastic American thing that we've done, you know. But
What
that's
is the
not
name of the English cider? Yeah, I'm trying to think of the English cider that's super.
Oh
sweet.
yeah, there's some really.
I can't think of it right now, but
There's
Jason's going to the computer. I love it. There is one that is really sweet and that's available all over England, and it's escaping me now. So
yeah, but then they have some really sour ones too.
They do have some sour ones and they have some dry ones. And have you ventured into some of like the Spanish Basque ciders and some of the
Yes, incredible. And
those are awesome.
Ciders,
really low alcohol, which is
yeah,
super weird, like 4% alcohol.
Yeah, and the French ciders too. I really like them. So, and I like all of them. I just, you know, our goal is again to brand something that's, if you will, we're the first cidery in Ventura, right? So we're kind of creating our own flavor. Now, if other people mimic it, that'd be awesome. You know, if they're from our area and they want to call it Ventura style or whatever the heck they want to call this stuff down the road. But we feel like we're you know, kind of creating our own style of cider, if you will. I've had plenty of flavored ciders, but I think the extreme that we're going with the flavors is a little more.
I can't imagine that that any beverage company has that kind of problem, right? I mean, you see it with beer, you see it with, now we're going with hard seltzers now, and I mean, it's just always push it, and then that pendulum swings back, and we find ourselves with, you know, that a well balanced, whatever it is, beer, cider, that kind of thing.
Thinking about those English competitors we were talking about, I did look it up. If you want to go to statista.com, this is an interesting little graph of the best brands of cider based on a 2018 poll in the UK, with Strongbow coming in at number 2. So there's a Copperberg. Yeah, Strongbow. There's a Copperberg I've never heard of before, but of the top 5, 3 of them I do recognize, with Strongbow, Recordalig, and Magners.
Yes.
What about
Recordalig, Joby, we've had in the restaurant before.
Yeah, Recorderling is super sweet now, but they have fun flavors like strawberry lime
Yeah.
and things like that. And they have their customer. I'm not, we're not going to knock them down. They definitely have their customer. Is Blackthorn on your list, Jason, at all?
It was on there. It is coming in at, where are you? Let's see, scroll.
I just think of the can, the Blackthorn can, and you
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Gary, while Jason's looking for that, you were mentioning French ciders, and couple summers ago we were in Brittany, and we had ciders every day, along with champagne, and then also rosé, a brut rosé,
Oh, yeah.
you know, and it's just one of one of my favorite memories of all is all three of those carbonated beverages as you're on the coast of France.
And they work so well with the food up there too.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible. I mean,
cut these. We were having these, essentially quadruple cream whatevers, and then you are able to wash it down with whatever the bubbles were. Yeah,
exactly.
It was perfect.
Yeah, one of the best desserts I had up that way was just simply an apple pastry, where I swore the guy had custard on it, and he said, no, it is just simply cut apples baked on top of this pastry. And it was so creamy that you had to think there was custard on it. But he said, no, that's a British thing. We don't do that.
So one of the trends that we really saw when we were filling the tap handles at Barrel House 101 with ciders making a surge was branching out away from apples as the base and seeing, pear and passion fruit, different fruits as a base. Kind of two directions of the question. One, what is it about apples as a base for you that you feel really creates the strong foundation? And would you consider breaking out into some other fruit as your juice base?
No, I mean, it's a good, I've had some really good fruit-based wines, sparkling wines, if you will. It's not something that we're looking at in our program, at least at this point. We're just trying to keep our hands around everything that we're doing right now. But one of the things that happens is if you really want to call it hard cider, it's got to be made from apples, right? So a pear is a puree, and then the other ones are just fruit wines, so they'll call it rhubarb wine or whatever they might call it. And so we're really trying to stick to the apples right now. We feel we've got a good thing going with our fermentation process and trying to keep it clean and fresh, keeping the SO2s out. And it's been, Jason, I mean, this, you guys have all had this way back when, but we've been on this project now for over 3 years. We just launched it last summer solstice, so we just passed our 1-year anniversary of Pier City Cider. But it was 2 years in the making of just trying to figure it out. And I'm 55 years old. I don't know if I don't have many more harvests left in me. So I'm just trying to get a hold of what I'm doing and trying to perfect that. And I'm going to leave that to the younger guys to figure out the other parts.
Well, luckily for you, Gary, you're not having to climb any ladders and pick the apples off the stem yourself. So
no, I couldn't do that. I don't pick grapes either. I tried that once, and that was a catastrophe. I just got in everybody's way.
Well, I'm thinking, you're talking about harvest here, and it seems like this is a great use of just in terms of efficiency, that you have your harvest when you're when you're in full wine production, and then the off season, it seems like.
It is. It's a great vertical for us. We go, half the year without our center being filled up. So we have, several stainless steel tanks. And I kept looking at these tanks saying, what can I do with these tanks? It cost a lot of money to ship those things over here from Italy or wherever we got them from. So it does, it fits in perfectly. And the nice thing that in the apple industry, it's super interesting. There are those cideries. Again, those are the classic cideries, Joby, like we were talking about earlier, that do it just like I do it in the wine industry, right? So they pick all their stuff. They put all of their labor into the orchard. They pick everything in the fall. They make up all of their cider for the entire year. But a lot of the cideries don't do that. They actually have brokers that find apples for them up in Washington all year long. So what ends up happening is all the apples are still, for the most part, harvested in the fall. But what happens is, we can't possibly eat all those apples. So they put these apples in like these hyperbaric chambers, if you will, and they evacuate all the oxygen and they put some inert gas in there and they chill it down. And then Safeway or Vons or Mott's or whoever calls and says, hey, we need apples. And then there's brokers that deal with that. So through the year, we definitely have a price increase and decrease, just depending on the supply and demand. But we have a broker that supplies quite a few of the cideries, at least on the West Coast, I know. And they go in and they find what they're doing. Again, their proprietary blend that they give to us. And the nice thing is they crush it and press it for us. They cold stabilize it down to about 35 degrees, put it on a reefer truck, and it's to us the next afternoon. It's absolutely incredible. So it's super fresh, and that's the way we want to keep it. Some of the cideries will use concentrate and things like that. I mean, if you really look at some of the labels, you'll see a lot of concentrate being used and not fresh juice. And that's a big difference too. And I think that's what gives you the clean, crisp taste, more of a wine-esque or champagne style taste to it, rather than that kind of baked flavor that you get with some of the ciders that might have used concentrate.
Some of what you're describing in the.
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, it's okay, Curtis. I'll relinquish the floor because I was just going to make a joke about the chamber and the chilling and inert gas. It felt like something that they had done to Walt Disney or some famous people in the past, hoping to revive them down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. They're going to take Walt's brain, scrape it in a few years and then recreate him. Right. Yeah. I think so.
A Futurama sort of, we've got the brain in a jar kind of thing. Well, I was just thinking about,
once you find the perfect apple, that could really be the great gateway for, consistency 10 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And the idea of a broker, every once in a while, these connections come where I think, we know about hop brokers in the beer industry.
Same thing.
And so even when you're talking about how you have this blend of apples that you use, it's similar in the brewing industry where they have a blend of hops, because
Sure.
if there's one year where there's a bad season, or like when we were in a hop drought 3-4 years ago, then these popular hops were out, so everyone was searching for similar flavor profiles. And it's just when something like what you're saying just kind of points out, I think it's that aha moment, like, well, of course there's a broker for apples,
Sure.
those are all over the place.
And remember the all of the wines and ciders and distilled spirits and all of that stuff started with the trash, right? So it was the stuff that nobody wanted to eat, and they would eventually turn it into something that was drinkable, edible, whatever it was. It's modern man that's taken it and made it a craft. In the old days, it was survival, right? So, you would jar stuff, you would can stuff, and you would brew and ferment and distill things also, right? So that's the nice part of it too, is that, we're there to, I don't want to say to pick up the grudge at the bottom of the chamber, but they're definitely not giving us the fancy Fuji apples that you're going to see at the store that everybody wants to bite into. The cideries are using the apples that people aren't really going to want to eat on their own. They're the apples that
the ugly fruit.
Yeah,
well, are the apples that people aren't going to want to buy, and they might taste delicious and make a great cider, right? So
completely. Yeah. I mean, crab apples, right? I mean, you guys have had crab apple pie probably, but you got to put so much sugar on the crab apple to make it taste good. It's barely apple anymore. It's mostly sugar. But I've had some crab apple ciders that are absolutely just blow your mind, and those are very lean and crisp and much more champagne or wine-like, and beautiful. Yeah.
So one of the things I was looking at when I pulled out the bottles, we put some in the fridge here at the house, and then as I was pouring it, I just happened to turn it upside down, and because I, whether it had settled, I just wanted to make sure that I had everything out. And then it got me thinking about how are you carbonating? And you talked just a tiny bit or mentioned carbonation at the beginning, like champagne style. But how are you carbonating these?
So we are not doing a champagne style carbonation. So we're not, and beer people call it bottle condition, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not doing that. We are brighting. So we have a bright tank, and that's how we're doing it. Mostly because we do have a little residual sugar in the cider itself, and I am not smart enough, nor do I want to add in chemicals to stop that thing from becoming a bomb later on.
Right.
So for the beer guys that have done that before and they've had a little residual or overshot it and they know what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So we really tried to stay away from any of the yeast blockers or any of the other chemicals in there. They're really not, like I said, there's nothing in this except cider, a little cane sugar, and some natural, the real essence. I don't even want to call them natural, and that's it. So there's no smoke and mirrors here. You're getting what you get, and sometimes you do get a little bit of settlement in there, only because I'm sometimes lazy. We don't filter this stuff, and every once in a while we get a batch of cider wine, if you will, or apple wine that doesn't want to clear itself all that much. So I'm getting better at that. We're using cold to do that now, and it's just taken me again some trials and tribulations. And Curtis, if you ended up with some of the stuff with the sludge at the bottom, sorry, that's just me kind of overshooting at the end when I was filling bottles, probably.
No, and I don't remember which one it was, and it could have been from the grapefruit vermouth. And if it had been sitting there, like, it doesn't matter if it's been through a filtering system or not. If you're letting a beer sit for a period of time, it's going to it'll settle out. So
It will. Okay.
it was there was nothing like that, or even like bottle conditioning sorts of sediment. I was just curious because it didn't seem like that's where this carbonation was coming from. And I mean, these are fairly thick bottles, but they still don't have a punt on the bottom. So I was curious as to what you were doing, how you were carbonating them and so.
Yeah. So, and I mean, maybe somewhere down the line, if somebody could teach me how to do that better, and I can tell you, the brewery guys have been fantastic. The guys in our area are, they're like brothers, right? You go in and talk to one brewer, and they'll tell you everything they know about brewing and how to fix it. Of course, I wasn't talking to them about brewing. I didn't know how to clean a keg. Hell, I didn't even know how to tap a keg. That's how sad it was. I wasn't the guy in college that I just went and picked the keg up, right? Somebody else tapped it. I never really understood any of that. So, but they sat down with me and they showed me how to clean a keg, showed me how to fill a keg, showed me, and how to bright. I didn't understand that part of it either. So, so they've been very, very helpful, and I've got to tip my hat to all of them. Especially the guys over at Made West have been really good, and I couldn't have done any of this without Poseidon or Mike Brown over at Flatfish or Cantera. Those three guys really, really helped me out quite a bit. And I guess I shouldn't. I'm going to get in trouble because I'm going to forget somebody, but the other one's Leashless, right? Those guys have been really good to me too. So some of those guys are just, they laughed when I told them, and half the time they just tell me, go YouTube it, right? So, and but I always figured there was more to it than just watching what I was seeing on YouTube. So they've been really good with that, and that's been the fun part of it, and part of the reason that we tried to make it a Ventura style cider is to pay homage to all those guys that are helping out.
Well, I think that's part of the problem with YouTube videos is that everything takes about 10 times as long, and so everything is shortened down. So you look at a 1.5-minute YouTube video, and you're like, I can get this taken care of in the next 15 minutes.
Yeah, no problem. 20 kegs, I can get that done no time, right?
Now, Gary, do you have any plans to make, just because we all like extreme versions of stuff, is there any plan to make something extreme or like a higher alcohol or champagne type of cider or anything are we going to see anything with a cork and a cage on it? Because I know you You make bubbly, so
And if
Yeah.
so, can we do the
can we have some?
voiceover? Extreme.
and can we taste it? If you need volunteers,
Yeah,
to
no,
taste
no. Right now, as of right now, no. We're still working on a couple more flavors. We're still trying to perfect what we've got. The great thing about Pier City is it grew up organically inside the winery. So there were people coming in a year and a half ago saying, before we even officially had cider, hey, do you have any of that cider in the back that we can try? And we built a lot of the flavors based on feedback from people. So the tamarind ice, I don't know if you guys had tried that at all. Really, really popular drink. I guess it's called Nuc Dome, I think. I'm going to screw it up, and Vietnamese people are going to get very angry, but I'm not making fun of it. It's a fantastic flavor combination of tamarind, little pineapple, and vanilla. Is basically what it is. It's very refreshing, really good. And I didn't even understand what tamarind was. I know I'd had the tamarind candies down in Mexico, and the little tamarind drink. I didn't even know tamarind was a fruit, honestly. I mean, that's, call me stupid, but and now I go into I just went to the Mexican market yesterday to pick up my chicken, and I see tamarinds in there, and I know now. It's like, oh, okay, that's the tamarind. I can grab those things and eat them. And it's people that come to us and give us those ideas too. And not only that, we'll change things. So if we start something off and people say, hey, this is too sweet, or this is too bitter, and we get that consistently, we'll hone it. So a lot of our flavors on version 2, version 3, version 4, even on some of the flavors. And so that's been awesome. And I gave them, we just had our club pickup, our first annual club pickup this last 2 weeks ago, I think, or a week ago. And I paid homage to everybody. And I said, thank you guys so much for helping me out. Thank you for giving me that feedback. I have very thick skin as a winemaker, because I've had plenty of people spit wine at me and say, oh my God, this is horrible. So, my feelings don't get hurt. I try to assure them that. And so they do, they will come to me and let me know when they do and don't like something. And then we'll work on it. If we feel we can make it better and we got good feedback from it, we'll work on making it better. And there's some that we've shelved, it's like, okay, that didn't really come over the way we wanted to. And so that's where we're spending a lot of our time right now, is just trying to hone it in. And then I talked to Jason the other day about this when Jason was inside, but the next point is how we want to grow this thing, because it's super small. It's a very, very small production. You guys probably, in some cases, some of you guys have probably made more beer in a month than we can make cider. And so that's what we're trying to figure out too, is how we want to move forward on it. And how we want to package it and just keep up, start keeping up with the demand that we have going on at the cidery or at the winery right now. A lot of times people come in and they'll want a certain flavor package and we won't have it available. And it's just because I can't keep up with it completely. So that's kind of where we're at. This whole, we're all socially distancing right now, so we know what's going on in the world. And the last 3 or 4 months has been a trial and we're trying to get through that to see where we're going to end up here at the other end. As of yesterday, we thought maybe Ventura was going to get shut down again with the wineries and the breweries and everything. So, we're still in murky waters, and we don't want to make any commitments on anything until this is all over with. And, hopefully all of you guys, and I'm pretty sure everybody's doing fine out there that you guys know. But once we get through all of this, we can kind of take another look and say, okay, what do we want to do now? And, how hurt did we get? How much skin do we have left in the game? And then, try to move on from there. So, but our plans are to actually move over to cans is what we're thinking. So bringing in a cannery and doing our own canning and start having some that we can pump out to some of the local stores once we get caught up in the winery or cidery. And then even Joby, believe it or not, actually put some in kegs and get it to a few of the restaurants that are asking for it too.
That's not a problem. You know where to find it. So.
Thanks.
But so we should say it. The winery, the cidery, the winery is open. What are your hours right now, Gary? For now, as we're recording this.
Yeah. So our modified hours are Friday, Saturday, 12 to 6, and Sundays 12 to 5. So we're just 3 days. We've cut it down to 3 days a week.
Okay.
We've had, things have been good. We're going to be able to pay the rent and, pay the employees, and all of that stuff will be fine. It's just the loss that you've had. And I'm sure, Joby, I know you've gone through the same thing. Part of it at the winery is 2 years ago, we expanded the winery quite a bit because we had people wanting to use the winery for events. So we had weddings booked up. We had all this stuff going on. And unfortunately, I feel bad. It's not just us losing out on the event and the income from the event, but it's also, talking to the bride and the groom, and they don't know where to go and how to do this. And a lot of them have rebooked with us, thank goodness, this next coming year. But some have had to go on and try to just get married wherever they can and move on, so yeah, it's that part of it's been fun. So that's where we're at right now.
And tasting is available, or? Yeah,
so super distance, I know you guys are in the same position. Everything's got to be 6 feet apart, 9-foot aisles. You got to wear masks. You got to clean everything with 5 different ingredients, and the bathrooms have to be spick and span every 50. And it's all great. I mean, we do this because we believe that we're helping, and we don't want anybody, God forbid, knock on wood, to get sick, anything because of us. That would be horrible. But it's a lot of work, and I know that too. On the restaurant side, you guys are in the same boat we are. So, and we have to serve food. Thank goodness we do. We do have a small kitchen, so we're able to pump out some meals.
Nice. The
kitchen is not big enough for the amount of meals that we're having to put out right now, so that's been fun.
I think we can all appreciate that, Gary. Don't worry. I don't think any place has.
They're never big enough, Gary. Even when you're a full-fledged restaurant, they're never big enough.
I know. Yeah, but I am by no means a professional chef, right? I'm a foodie. I love food. But oh my God, when you go back there, I'm pretty much the guy that's back there sweating all day long, and it's just to try to keep it alive right now, and that's
cheese plates and chips, Gary. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful segue though too, thinking about the roots in the community, and because literally what we're talking about right now is that Gary, as the head winemaker, head cider maker, is also the guy in the back when Karen or one of the staff calls out for a cheese plate or pizza. He's back there going, and he's spinning.
Jason's been in there. It's fun. I've become quite the short order chef, that's for sure. And then I also.
But there are individuals.
What, Jay?
I was just gonna say though, there are individuals who are really gravitate to that though, and really respond to that local influence. I know when I was sitting in there on Saturday chatting with you, there's a couple coming in to celebrate their 24th anniversary, and had plans to do something a little bit bigger. And even despite the fact that they had to stay small and distance from what would have been their normal guests, they chose to come into Four Bricks Wine and to share their moment with you and with the staff at the winery. And I think that speaks volumes to how people can relate to your identity and relate to your influence on the community.
No, I appreciate that, Jace. I really do. Like I said, the city of Ventura, the whole Oxnard Plain has just been, a fantastic family to us. And, we absolutely love being there. And I told somebody this a few years ago, everybody's talking about leaving California. They're going to have to drag me out of here, penniless if I leave this place, because there is no other place on earth, and especially the Central Coast. It doesn't get any better than the Central Coast of California. So, and it all starts in Ventura County. So,
well, Gary, you got Curtis to come to Ventura. You got Curtis to come to Ventura. We could not do. Got Curtis. Yeah, Jason and I could not get Curtis to come out to Ventura. So you got him.
He was like.
He's that suburb guy in Camarillo.
And he wouldn't come over to downtown, so he stayed on your side of the freeway. So
yeah, we are a low town, right?
I don't know. I didn't say that. I'm just saying.
No, we are. We're in the industrial complex. I mean, downtown's a lot of. He has to park and all that stuff and walk. That's a lot of stuff going on.
Well,
Joey, in my you not liking.
I was gonna say, in my defense, Jason and Joby have both been talking about the crowds that have been in Ventura proper, and I'm saying as far away from that.
We might have scared him off.
Yeah. Well, it's good. I mean, what they've done.
You notice I was
downtown
trying to
is-
talk through his defense.
Yeah, what they've done downtown is
Right.
fantastic. I mean,
the Main
if
Street.
you have
the
not
whole
been
Main Street
downtown
move.
Ventura, you guys got to check it out before they tear it all down because it
No,
is.
Curtis won't check it out. But Jason and
No.
I have been there.
We're gonna have to send Curtis pictures, or we're gonna have to do like some travel like live streaming
It'll
to
be a
show
body
Curtis what's
cam
going
kind
on.
of thing, so I can live.
He's
through
essentially the grandma. He's essentially the grandma that won't leave her retirement room anymore.
I'll have my headset on with my mic, and I'll be telling you, okay, 4 steps forward. Now turn to the left. I want to see what's over there.
So,
Okay, keep
that's
on
why you-
walking.
That's why you should be honored, Gary, that he did come out to your.
Oh yeah.
Your
No,
Well,
it was great to see him and his wife.
It was pretty special. I mean, I talked to Karen in the last few days because I'd made an appointment to come in, and then I couldn't make it. So as I walked in, and then I saw Karen, and she was bringing me over to where my box was, and I was looking out at my wife who was outside by the car, and she's pointing at me like, "Hey, look over here," and I'm trying to think, what? And then Gary comes out this way, and then as I'm talking to Gary, then I see Jason standing outside the door, and I'm like, "Whoa, this is pretty fantastic." But I would be remiss, Gary, if I did not mention this, that it was a highlight of the day for my wife to see you. She was thrilled to see you, and that we were getting baubles on top of it. So I was trying to get it as a surprise, and then then I was like, "Do you want to go with me? Just to get out of the house." "Yeah, I'll come with you." And then as we're driving, she's like, "Okay, now you're gonna get me baubles, right?" And I'm like, "God damn it, I was going to, but now you just ruined the surprise." So anyway, we're looking.
Sweet. She's sweet, and give her my love.
Well, I will. So one of the things, we're going to Morro Bay next week after the 4th, and as we're sitting there and relaxing, that's going to be one of our evening pleasures for sure. So
Did you guys?
She asked
you guys
for
get
the
a house up
winemaker to
Morro
sign
Bay?
the bottle.
right, I should.
Yeah,
have.
Curtis
get a house up
rented
there,
a house.
Mark?
Yep. Curtis, you rented a house, right?
Yeah, we rent it. So we get in on Sunday. We're going to clean it from tip to top, or whatever the saying is. And
East to west, north to south.
right.
You got, alcohol in
I've got
both hands.
holsters and spray bottles.
Curtis, you might want to stop by so I can give you some yellow spray, man.
Hey, all
The
right.
yellow spray is pretty fantastic.
Joby, what'd you say? Curtis is going to clean it from east to west and north to south.
Doing one of those things, right? I'm going to do as much.
He's definitely not going to go
of-
for a Hail
of-
Mary. He's
of
going to make sure
blessings
it's
that
clean.
he right.
They're supposed to.
Joby, you were talking
I
earlier.
read that they were supposed to like wait 24 hours or something, right? Between people being in the home. Wasn't that the whole deal? with
Just enough time for everything to be clean, you know.
I don't know about that. It was busy on the 4th and it was open on the 5th. So I don't know what that says.
It's good. Take it.
Well, it should
Joey,
be
you were
beautiful.
talking before we close out though. You were talking about how you're not really a cider guy. You've got the man on the screen right now who can help with your journey. If you were going to have a cider that like came from your identity or was named after you that you would enjoy, what flavor profile are we going for, Joby? What are the ingredients?
I'm thinking black cherry bourbon.
Bourbon, Gary, you nailed it. I was thinking bourbon, and you got the black cherry in there. And I've had only one other, and it was actually, I think it was Crispin. They had a bourbon something cider, and it was pretty tasty.
Yeah,
All right, Gary, when are you gonna make that? When are you gonna
I'm
make
thinking,
that?
yeah, no, I'm seriously, Joby. I'm working on one.
Sounds like an old fashioned, or a Manhattan.
or
Manhattan.
Manhattan. Yeah, kind
Okay.
of go down that road. Yeah.
All right, Jason, I'm in. I'll try. No, don't get me wrong. I love trying them.
I know.
I love trying the ciders. Beer,
You're a tough customer, Joby. I know that.
beer has my heart. What can I say? And
I
bourbon.
know.
Hey, Curtis,
We
agree.
also want to note very quickly that the backdrop that Gary's got for his video right now.
Oh, yeah.
When
This
I
is
first
great.
saw one of his Facebook Live videos for Four Bricks Winery, I thought it was a special, like a little VIP tasting room at the winery. This is Gary's home, right? This is a room in Gary's home where he gets to entertain and started the whole winemaking process. Gary, over your shoulder, there's a rack of wine with a spotlight on it. Are there any bottles in there that are like very sought after? Anything that we should be trying
Yeah,
to
well,
like, sneak in?
everything you see up there is actually Justin Isosceles reserve from Justin when he was still there before the new owners. So that's-
Fuji, or was it Fuji water?
yeah. So this is when, it's actually got Justin and Deborah's signature on the boxes. So that's all really good stuff. And I think it goes back to 2000. I think we have 2001 somewhere.
Gary, I understand that 2020 is the prime year to drink the 2001. So if
Oh,
you guys want to get together, I volunteer to cook some steaks.
oh yeah. Well, you know what? I've got so many of these now. I mean, we stopped.
Oh, Gary, this is not a problem. We can take
No, steaks would be great. I'm there. There's
I've got
a
plenty of
few.
steaks.
This rack kind of over here, this side is kind of the rack that I tell people don't touch. So that's a lot of the, the wines that are meant for aging. And then also back over on this side, we've got a lot of the wines that we collect when we go overseas. So, I love Italian wines. I can't get enough Italian wines. We went to Australia 2 years ago and got some incredible wines down there. And
Yellowtail.
Yeah. Yeah, that's stored right here next to $2 Chuck.
So what I'm hearing, Jason, is pretty much the entire wine cellar is off limits.
Right, right.
No.
I know.
There's plenty of stuff.
I was going to offer up my Wagyu steaks, but I don't even know if the Wagyu will qualify.
I do see a magnum of isosceles behind
Yeah,
you.
look at this.
Oh,
This is homemade wine from 2004, right? So this is our label when we were just making it at home. Stewart
awesome.
Cellars. So
That's
that
awesome.
you can drink all you want of if you can stand it.
So, Gary,
What's
that's
the
the one you
most
drink.
vintage wine you've ever drank, Gary?
What is the oldest wine you've ever drank?
I had an incredible story. I was up in San Ynez at a friend's house who we found out that his consulting winemaker is Mr. Benedict from Sanford Benedict, right? So that goes back long time. And I'd never met Mr. Benedict. I'd met Mr. Sanford many a times. Mr. Benedict is he's the farmer, right? He's the guy that gets in the dirt. And here comes this guy out of the vineyard, and he's got blue jeans on, and he's in his 70s at least, right? And just spry and just a pleasant man. It was great to sit down with him, and we were all sharing some favorite wines. And he left for a little while, and he comes back, and he had a 1970. It was like the first or second year, I think it was a 74 Pinot Noir Sanford Benedict from Santa Rita Hills. And not Santa Rita Hills, from San Ynez, from the old Benedict ranch, and Sanford Benedict Ranch. And he opened that bottle up. It was super special. It probably had passed its time, but it still had vibrancy in it. It still had things going on. And people talk about California wines not lasting. I mean, 1974, that thing was, and this was just a few years ago. And I could have drank the whole bottle. I mean, the bottle was gone in 5 seconds. One of the funny things when he was pouring it, he was so worried about it falling apart. He said, once I start pouring, I won't stop. So just get your glasses out, right? And he just went around and poured it until, we got to the dredge at the bottom. And it was special. It was great to have it with the guy who planted it, who made it. This is way back when they were probably still trying to, biting their fingernails and trying to figure out if it even work. And Sanford Winery's become a legend up there. So that was fun. So that's probably the oldest I've had is late early mid 70s. I think it was 74. How about you, Joe?
Oh man, I'm trying to remember now. I've definitely had some 90s stuff, which is now kind of old, right?
Yeah.
Early 90s. Yeah, I think so. I'm like you. I like the experience more than the actual. And I think we all talked about that. We've talked about it on past shows. It's just the experience of drinking it. Because maybe if you actually had bought that bottle, you may not have enjoyed it, and you may have thought,
I probably would have never opened it, right? Just
that's true.
Had him sign it and be done.
Yeah, and I don't have quite the display you do. I just have my wine rack to the side, refrigerated wine rack. But I think my problem is not opening the bottles. And we talked about this with cellared beer, and I feel like I don't know when to open it. I'm not sure. The old way was you're supposed to buy a case, so you open a bottle at a time and figure it out. And I think I've been guilty of not opening my bottles. To answer your question, and I think it's time. 2020 has taught us that we don't open bottles.
Yeah, there's been plenty where I've missed the mark. I've waited too long for sure. And I know that bottle was a great bottle, and it didn't last. I'm still a big believer. I'll call the wineries and ask them. I don't have a problem calling and saying, hey, I got this bottle, blah, blah, blah. Is it ready? Or do you think it's ready? Or should have I drank it?
Yeah.
I have no problem with that. Because some of those wines the wines that you're wanting to age for a while are usually not cheap either. So, you're wanting to hit that mark when, they told you, hey, just lay on this thing for 10 years, it'll be great. And you call them 5 years later, like, oh no, that passed. What were you thinking? Oh, I swore you told me to I swear you told me to wait 10 years,
Definitely my best memory for scariest moment of a bottle that I sold was at Ojai Beverage, and somebody, I won't say his name, he's pretty famous, but he was flying to Vegas and he was going to have a dinner with some potential clients, and he bought 1955 Chateau Latour.
Woo!
That we were scared to have, and that, and we got it from a very good provenance, and it had good record keeping. It was in a room, temperature controlled, and I want to say it was roughly $1,900, somewhere around there, $1,800-$1,900. So
yeah, he would have paid
bought
triple.
it. We were scared.
Though, right?
Yeah, we were scared when he bought it. That we knew where he was going, and then he called us from there, and he was like, "Hey, the cork," and we're like, "Oh man, look, it's 70, whatever. I think it was 70 years old at that time. I'm trying to remember. This was probably 2008 or something, 2009. Anyway, he said, "Okay, I'm trusting you guys." We said, "Please decant it," blah blah blah. Anyway, and then when he came back into Ojai, he told us that the dinner went smashing. Everybody loved the wine, and we were like, sigh of relief, because we told him when he bought it that he couldn't return it.
Yeah, of course.
And but he was such a good customer that we may have returned it for him if he had asked for it.
It would have hurt, but you would have.
It wouldn't hurt. And that was a really highly rated wine, and I was so curious about that bottle. It was such a cool bottle, 55 Latour, and we had a lot of money invested in it.
Oh, of course. It's a risk. It's a risk all the way down the line.
All the way around.
Yeah.
So it's.
With that being said, we've got. I know we're coming up on our time for tonight. We don't want Gary to go past his Sleeping Beauty, but every winemaker has got to have their proper rest, right? Because you got to focus on the ingredients.
Yeah.
And I'm looking around my apartment right now, and I've got a 3-liter of red wine, a Cabernet sitting here, and we've got magnums that people buy. What is your take, Gary, on big bottles? Similar to what we're talking about, holding on to them too long, or how they should be served. What's your philosophy on big bottles? Are they display only? Are they drinkable? Are they just showpieces?
No. The thought process on it, and I don't know how well it's true. I'm sure I believe the Psalms on this. This is definitely a sommelier question. But they say that the larger the format, the longer it'll store, for sure. And I have a feeling it's just, the cork is where the oxygen is being exchanged, and that's where the problem can happen. So the idea is that you have more volume in there, less surface area. So the oxygenation is going to be slower over time, and it should take longer to get to prime than it would a 750 ml bottle. So yeah, I think that 3-liter, if you've got a 3-liter there, and it's it also, it has to be a good, I don't want to say a good wine, but the right pedigree, if you will. So something like a Cabernet Sauvignon or a Pinot or a Syrah, or even a Riesling, some incredibly old Rieslings. Those wines live. If it's a 3-liter Zinfandel from 2004, you better drink it, because it's going to be close to done, right? The Zin just doesn't have the longevity of the other grapes. So it really depends on the varietal, on how long you can keep it also.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely have
Joby and Curtis,
factor,
got to get Gary in the crew, because I've got this big bottle of red wine. I also have this big bottle of St. Bernardus, Habit 12. So we're just going to have a big barbecue at 4 bricks and start cracking these big bottles.
We'll stay 6 feet apart. Don't worry.
Not after 3 liters, we won't be. We'll be like, hey, I love you guys. Come on.
That is the problem, Curtis, right there. You just said it.
I will not be able to control myself. I know it. I know myself.
Before we close out, Gary, we want to talk real quick about how to get a hold of you. I know the websites, 4brickswine.com is one of the places to go, but thinking about the packaging for the cider, can we get it anywhere outside of the cidery right now, or is it only in person?
Yeah, it's all we can do right now in the cidery. We were hoping this year that we would be able to start getting a little bit outside the cidery, but hopefully towards the end of the year we'll have it. But right now, just at the cidery. We're located in Ventura, of course. We're off Eastman Street. A lot of you guys know the Wine Cave in the area, so that's on Telephone. We're kind of a couple blocks behind them on Eastman. Not far away. You can go to fourbrickswine.com or piercitycider.com also, or pier.city also. So that's another one you can go to.
That's a cool extension.
Yeah, and you can always get a hold of Karen. She, if anybody wants to do the old-fashioned way and call, her number is 805-256-6006. And you can also email Karen at karen@fourbrickswine.com or info@piercitycider.com.
I like that reference too, because when you mentioned it for the wineries, of actually calling them and getting their recommendation on the vintages and when to crack it open, I would have not thought. I figure once I buy the bottle, I'm left to my own devices. But I like the fact that you really should be going back to the experts to learn about their product if you have questions.
And you're hoping that they're drinking it. I mean, we do hold back, 5-6 cases of everything we make, and we taste it throughout the years to find out, if it's good, what's going on with it. Because we do have people, even though we're not an old winery, we do have people call us and say, hey, have you had a 2008, Seductive or Rendezvous or something like that? And we like to be able to say that, we did have one last year or the year before, and it's tasting fantastic. You should, drink it. You could drink it probably now or in the next 3 years, because we don't know a lot about our wines either. The style that we make, I don't know how long they're going to last. I know for sure if it's Zinfandel, it's not going to last a long time. And so far the Sangioveses have been doing really well. And then of course, any of the Rhone wines, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre are all really good agers. We know that. So, yeah. So I wouldn't be afraid. And also the other thing is if you ever get a bottle of wine that's corked or not good, always call the winery and let them know that. They will take care of it for you. Even if they don't have that vintage, they'll replace it with something from a newer vintage if they can. Never drink a bottle of wine and think that just because it's corked, it's your fault. It's none of our faults. It's just nature, and nature, it exists on the cork, and that's what you get. The guys want to make stinky beer, sour beer with that same stuff, but it doesn't work with wine.
Keep it out of the wine.
Yeah.
Well,
for now, Gary, till someone comes up with that.
Yeah, the sour wine. I don't know.
And I appreciate your steely nerves that when you said Sangiovese, you didn't go Sangiovese. Like how can you say Sangiovese without putting on some really bad Italian sort of accent with it?
Well, my favorite one is Montepulciano.
Oh, I love Montepulciano. Que bello. Oh,
I really like Brunello. I like Brunello de Montecito.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Which
all
is
the way around.
So
all right, it's devolving.
Yeah. Brunello is, if you've been to Brunello, if you've been to Monte.
I have not. That is on the list.
We stayed a week in Montepulciano in a agriturismo right outside. It was.
It's an incredible place.
Do a little Italian man.
So Montepulciano.
Curtis's accent is definitely coming out right now. How many ciders have you had, Curtis?
Just 2, just enough.
It's incredible. But Joe,
one last plug though for me.
I want to get over.
I really like the Nebbiolo that you guys have going on right now, and I think that's a grape and a varietal that a lot of people don't know about. And so, if you don't mind gushing on your own wine for a second, since I've kind of set it up.
That's an incredible project. That wine is actually made. That wine is grown in Ojai, and it's a vineyard called Caneamante. The couple were nice enough to let us kind of lease that, if you will, that vineyard for the first 4 or 5 years of its life. And they have since taken it over, and they're making their own wines. So hopefully those wines will be coming out in the Ojai area somewhere. I haven't talked to Ed and Deb in a little while, but I'm hoping those come out, because I'm telling you, I think Ojai has great potential for Italian wines. We have made Montepulciano there. We've made Sangiovese, and they also grow Nebbiolo. And Nebbiolo is is I probably talked to 30 winemakers before I made Nebbiolo, just trying to find out how they do it. And these were winemakers in California. I had not gone to Piemonte at the time. I've been since, where the great Nebbiolos are made. And every California winemaker I talked to said, I've done it, but I'm not an expert, and I'm not doing it anymore, or I couldn't sell it. So we did it truly like they do in Piedmont area. We used a large format barrels. We aged it 3 years because it's all about tannin control, and we've had now our second vintage out, and both vintages are just fantastic. I mean, the first vintage is just rocket. I mean, it's so good right now, and I have told many wine people in California that I'm pretty sure it's the best Nebbiolo ever made in California. And if it's not, I would love to taste the one that's better. It's Jason, thank you, but it's a fantastic wine. It really is. And I tip my hat to Martin Ramirez, who with Ojai Vineyard, who planted that and has taken care of it all these years, and to Ed and Deb Guerra, who had the vision of planting this great vineyard in the middle of Ojai.
And you have that in the tasting room right now. Yeah.
The Nebbiolo, we usually don't have it on the tasting list too much anymore. It's if you have an Ed Nebbiolo, it's a wine that is very tannic. So this would be, I would say the equivalent of the most IPA you could get, right? So this has got hop values of 10,005, whatever they come up with, right? EQs, whatever they call them, So the tannin of Nebbiolo is huge.
Okay.
But what happens with Nebbiolo, like any of the great cabs or anything else, when that tannin starts to fall apart, if you will, or start to soften, it creates more of that luscious velvet kind of feeling into the mouth, because now it goes from this hard, harsh tannin, it's chained up a little bit more, and now you get this softer, more luscious tannin. And the first year's vintage, which I think was 2014, is just now starting to get that where it's calming down a little bit. You're getting some of the fruit now coming out of it, which you didn't get 5 years ago from it. And it's been a great project. We still have 2 more bottlings of that, because it's 3 years in barrel. So it's been fun. Yeah, Jace, and I'm glad you got to try it. And if you guys want to have any, and Joby for sure, if you want to try some Nebbiolo, we'll get you guys both
I'll be stopping by.
bottles of those. It's really good stuff. It really is.
Thank you.
Those are the beauties of being a part of the membership as well. And, especially in these times where it's hard to get products, sometimes you don't want to go out and about. You don't want to go into a winery because of our distancing. Being a member of a club and having it shipped to your door is a great perk. Surprising perk that I used to not take as much value in previously, because I like to be in the space. I want to interact with, people like Gary at the winery. But now, for those who aren't comfortable going out, but still want to be able to experience some great beverage, you got to get on the membership club.
Yeah. And some of those wines, like the Montepulciano, we don't make enough for outside consumption. So some of those things are just really, really small vintages. But we try to, on the club side of things, that's the other part of it. That's like making all the cider flavors. We're trying to do things to keep things new for people. We don't want to just serve the same 4 wines forever. And so we're always constantly looking at bringing in varietals or different styles that we can do, especially one-offs, things that people can take and say, oh, that was great. That was a new thing, or, good on you, Gary. We just released our first Pinot Noir after all these years, and that's come off really well. And we just sent it to the vineyard owners. They wanted to try it to see how it was, and they're quite the winemakers themselves. So I haven't heard back from them, so I'll let you know if I have. But in the Pinot world, you're always worried about that, because Pinot's a peculiar one.
All right, Gary, we are on our time right now. We're hitting our block. We can't thank you enough for coming on this evening. It's been fabulous. The ciders are incredible. I've enjoyed them so much that I can now say Montepulciano the way that it's supposed to be said. And make sure that you go check out fourbrickswine.com and Pier City Cider.com for all of your for all of the info. And just know that generally it looks like the tasting rooms are Friday and Saturday 12 to 6, and then Sundays 12 to 5 is what I was seeing.
Yep. Yeah. And if you can make an appointment, that helps us out too, in taking care of everybody, making sure everybody's taken care of properly. And I wanted to thank all three of you guys for getting this back up off the ground. I think it's much needed in the Ventura County area. There are so many great wineries, breweries, cideries, distilleries, just craft spirits going on all over the place. And then, some of the best restaurants, I think, in the West Coast. So I applaud you guys for getting into this. It's much needed. And if you need anything, if you need me back on or you need any help, just holler, because I'm 100% behind this with you guys.
Thank you. We'll definitely I don't think we've had a bad show with you, Gary.
No.
Oh,
If memory serves right.
That's right.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, guys.
So much. And for listeners, those live viewers, we'll be back in about 5 minutes. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Happy Hour. We'll be back next week with more questionable content, great guests, and drinks all around.